The Minnesota Wild have found a hidden gem in this draft, and it seems like now people are really starting to notice Adam Benak and what he brings to this Minnesota Wild roster in the future. We're going to be breaking that down, as well as going over multiple signings the Minnesota Wild have made and going over why this is a major change of plans from Bill Guerin compared to what we originally thought. We're going to be breaking it all down here in this video. Before we do get into it, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to hit the sub button if you haven't already. As we mentioned in the previous videos, we're going to have a lot of news coming in. We're on the road to 2K. We're currently sitting at 1,829 subs, less than 200 away from 2K, and your support's been absolutely phenomenal as of late. We appreciate you guys watching these videos, but let's get straight into it. I want to talk about Adam Benak first. Now, Minnesota Wild didn't have too many draft picks this year. They had to go and choose wisely after getting rid of quite a few in the David Jiricek trade, and this has something to do with David Jiricek as well, and actually coming into it, Adam Benak, drafted by the Minnesota Wild in the 4th round, and many people are calling this the steal of the draft, and I'm completely willing to throw that out there and compare this to many of the other Minnesota Wild draft picks and kind of signings and moves they could have made over the past few seasons, and putting this into perspective as to what this means for the Minnesota Wild future. Now, as you see, the Minnesota Wild Young Guns put this out on Twitter. Adam Benak was the highest scoring U18 player in the USHL during the 24-25 season, finishing 17 points ahead of fellow Czech Vaclav Nestrasil, who was selected in the 1st round yesterday, and an excellent value pick in the 4th round. Now, this was a couple days ago, of course. Now, when this was out in the draft, people are really starting to come and see this come out as, a very, very good value pick. And this also comes with Daily Faceoff putting out their idea behind Adam Benak here and saying the Czech national Benak is one of the smallest players in the draft at 5'7", 160 pounds. Played center at the junior level with Czechia national team and the USHL Youngstown Phantoms, but his measurables will make him difficult to proposition for the pro ranks. Benak is even dwarfed by undersized centers like Braden Point and Yanni Gourde, who both are 5'11" and 5'9", coming off, and not that heavy either. Now, when you're comparing this to many other players, obviously Adam Benak is undersized, but this is one that we're not too worried about. The Minnesota Wild are not the smallest team right now, and even down the line, coming in a few years, they're only getting bigger with a lot of these younger players coming down the line. And honestly, I'm not very much worried about his size. He is still very young. He will grow. There's no doubt about that. And whether or not that, he gets his size up, even if it's significantly or if it's just a little bit, I'm still trusting what he's going to bring and what his level of play has shown over these past few seasons with the USHL and, of course, playing with Czechia as well. Now, coming into it, and I want to pull this up here, looking at this graph, I apologize, I cannot remember who this is from, but when you're going through all of these, looking at this, Adam Benak, 4th round, 102nd overall, playing with Youngstown, his generation, his scoring, his defense, and transition. 3 stats that they're really showing here, which may not look on the surface level exactly, NHL ready yet, but he's not NHL ready yet. His play generation, his play creation is already right there at 80%. You go to the scoring, 70, transition 60, and the defense, not really what he's known for. Doesn't help that he's much undersized for this, but when you look at the personal rankings, which I think is the most important thing right here, you're comparing pairing him as a 87% personal ranking over out of 100, of course. And looking at that, obviously, it's not a bad decision. It's not a bad way to kind of put him into this ranking. And even though 57 games played, and 30 points with the USHL, and he was 53rd out of all forwards, this is really not bad at all for a guy who is in his 1st season there, and of course, will be kind of growing into this game. And you see, with Youngstown last year, 56 games played, 59 points actually is what he did have. I don't know what that graphic was talking about, but you see the 3 games played and 3 points in the playoffs, and this is going to be a major development year for him. Now, he did, of course, as you probably just saw from that graphic there, get drafted to the Bulldogs in the OHL. So having him in the OHL could be a major change compared to the USHL. It still is uncertain whether he will attend the OHL or play in the OHL, or whether he will stay in the USHL, take that American road. But he was the 2nd overall pick in this import draft. And as you see from Michael Russo here, Adam Jiricek is playing in Brampton right now, Brantford. The Bulldogs. Good pals with Adam Jiricek, David's brother. That'd be a huge help. Good friends with David, too, who delivered him his garb in Czechia when the Wild drafted him. And it looks like Benak, his size advantage and plans to prove people wrong. So, he's acknowledging that the fact that people are calling him undersized now, and you see, he's looking at this as something that, I want to prove these guys wrong, whatever it may be, and this is something that he needs to get. Obviously, you don't want to be undersized. You don't want people saying you're undersized, but it's a good fire to light underneath you to kind of get further in through your progression and get into a whole different kind of game now. He's not going to change his play style too much, But under Minnesota Wild's control, now with Brantford as well, and also still with Youngstown, wherever he takes his route, it's going to be a very good decision for him to kind of come into this and get a new look here as a player that's going to be, hopefully at least, a very underrated player in the NHL, whether that takes a few years or not. But we need to move into our next topic as well, because it kind of comes down to linking this kind of narrative of these younger players coming into the Minnesota Wild to the moves that were made by the Minnesota Wild to add to this season. Now, we were expecting a big move, whether it was Brock Besser, who ultimately did end up staying in Vancouver and stayed as the player there that they're going to rely on in a team that was really uncertain. They were looking, the Wild that is, we're looking for that big splash here in free agency and didn't get to it. Started off with making a trade for Vladimir Tarasenko, who there was a lot of concern about that by many people who were thinking that, he's not the player he once was at 33 years old, 6'1", 33 points in 80 games. That's not the guy we've seen win the Stanley Cup there in 2017. But as a player like Vladimir Tarasenko joins this team with a little under a $5 million contract, that started to eliminate more names from this team. And ultimately then we saw a Nico Sturm come into this team, be a fourth line, third line centerman, wherever you want to put him. Two-time Stanley Cup winner. His game has completely changed from where we were with the last time he was with the Minnesota Wild, and I think this puts a whole new kind of idea behind the Minnesota Wild, and that also comes down to the moves that they have made over the past few days, going here and signing, bear with me, Cal Peterson, goaltender there, another, at least probably going to be a third goalie right now, as well as Samuel Levi, Riley Mercer, depending on what's going to happen down there in the AHL. Could be a third goalie in the NHL behind Jesper Wallstedt, Nico Kubel, Ben Gleason, Matt Kiersted, and Tyler Pitlick. So you see a lot of players on, small contracts, less than $1 million contracts, but a lot of players who have the opportunity to come up and down in the AHL. Now, you're looking at this as someone, and saying, why did they make these moves? Why is all this happening when we have so many young players that can crack this roster? This team is looking for experience. Obviously the young talent needs to get into the lineup, but they can't be given a spot. And I think that the way that this team's kind of been structured here in free agency, from not just not just Bill Guerin, not just here, but these players as they're kind of coming into one, we're getting a good look right now as what's going to be the kind of the idea of the Minnesota Wild over the next few seasons and where these players are really going to turn out. And is making another big competition for these younger players to get into the NHL, which is a big need for the Minnesota Wild, and that's one thing that we've been speaking about a lot in the past few videos and kind of going over the past few weeks with the AHL, is that they don't know how to win in the AHL. You're developing players down there specifically to develop players, but you're not teaching these players how to win at a level before the NHL, which is one issue that we've seen with the Minnesota Wild that many teams have already had resolved, and it goes to show it works in the NHL. So, taking a look at the offense here, of course you're going to need to add these guys. It's like, I think that, the Marcus Johansson re-signing was a big one. Second line here. Not going to be probably second line at the beginning of the season, but you never really know. That could still work if need be. Nico Sturm, going to be could be even a third line center, but maybe right now the fourth line center. A guy like that who just comes off a Stanley Cup win with the Florida Panthers, that's a very good fit for your bottom four. Matt Zuccarello there taking the second line above Vladimir Tarasenko, and you see, a 33-year-old making 4.75 on the third line. That's a guy who has won a Stanley Cup. That's a guy who's going here and hoping to have a bounce-back year, back to when he did win a Stanley Cup style of play. And, of course, Marco Rossi, which all signs are really pointing to now with this $10 million left, that he's going to re-sign with the Minnesota Wild. So this team is seeming to make a bigger push for the playoffs right now and ultimately getting to the Stanley Cup. Getting past the first round is the main thing. And right now, I think Bill Guerin is making a smarter decision to get these types of players rather than having some of these younger players start punching above their weight class in the NHL and, sit and watch how this team develops, plays, and see some veterans go to work here in the NHL. So I think that we have a good reasoning behind these signings. I think we have the truth revealed, I guess we could say, in a YouTube terms, behind why Bill Guerin is making these moves. So let me know what you think about, first of all, about Adam Benak, and second of all, about these moves the Wild have made. Do you think this is a kind of a skilled, smart decision from Bill Guerin? And as me and Josh mentioned, if Bill Guerin, is not comfortable with getting a guy like Brock Besser and then bring in some of these other veterans, why take the risk when you get a lot of these guys on a one-year deal? You can change the entire look of this team next year in free agency, or you can run it back. There's a lot of options that Bill Guerin is building here, and I do think, honestly, it is a much smarter decision than putting all your eggs in one basket. So let me know what you think there about both of these topics here in the comments below. But that is all I have in this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. I'm signing up, though. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.